Howdy, y'alls. It's me, Dr. E. I'm back for Module 2, and this week we're digging into informing people about their own culture, indigenous peoples, and anthropological perspectives. Oof, meaty stuff. Excuse me, jump around here. Got a flip screen so I can see things. um, I'm gonna try to give you an overview and some extra insights into our key readings and resources this week. I'm going to start with digging on into one of the most contentious and long-going ethical debates in anthropology, the case of Napoleon Chagnon and the Yanomami, or Yanomamo. Both are correct. There's even other pronunciations. Um, so pick one and just stick with it is what I recommend. So, all right. Where to start? Napoleon Chagnon. Well, in our readings, you get a nice overview, and then you get an example of a pro argument, pro in that Chagnon violated key anthropological ethics. And just some other bad things in his work with the Yanomamo, which spans like 30 years. So it's very extensive, and part of what's really bothersome for anthropologists is his work was something that we used to share very extensively. I remember in my intro anthro course, we read his work. It was fundamental reading. But yeah, I've grown up in the aftermath and of all that. I got my master's and my doctorate, and it's been an ongoing debate throughout my academic career. So yeah, don't underestimate how important this is. Hint, hint, wink, wink. Let's take a quick look. You basically have some allegations that are levied against Chagnon. And rather than go through each of those, what I'm going to do is kind of give you a brief overview of the various arguments, pro and con. So on the pro side, we have Terence Turner, and he is quite clear in stating how and why Chagnon violated specific ethical considerations and did poor field work. And pretty much, how to put it mildly, had a significant impact on Chagnon's career. I think that might be a polite way of saying it. So on the con side, we have Edward Hagen and several others, but I'm just going to refer to it as the Hagen side of things. And he really suggests that, Terence is just bent about sociobiology, and goes through a lot of semantic, arguments about how and why Terence has got it all wrong. Now, I gotta say, be really clear from the get-go, I'm on Terence's side. Chagnon did some not good things. Remember first video we talked about the good life, right? Well, Chagnon did not practice that. That's not saying he's a bad guy, but in terms of doing field work and anthropology, no. It makes for a great story. It's very sexy, if you would, in the anthropology world, very exotic. He's got this longitude to it, so it's through history, 30 years or abouts of data. And Terence, on the yes, he violated ethics side, really kind of tears into him. Starts off with the whole idea of fierceness. Everything that you read about the Yanomamo back in the day, back when Chagnon was doing all his work, and Chagnon in particular, really perpetuates this idea of the Yanomamo being savage and fierce. In fact, he regularly uses the word fierceness, that they are the fierce people, I think is one of his lines. Yeah, what do you think that does, painting people in such a negative way? Uh, I, I, it clearly has had an impact. In fact, if there's any good that came out of all of this, the Yanomamo have become highly organized and political. They now seek their own autonomy and rights and political recognition. So yeah, this whole idea of fierceness really essentializes, right? That's a fancy way of saying stereotype or misrepresents. Essentialization is you're really just reducing a people to a specific thing, and in this case, it's fierceness. In fact, it's the whole concept that backs Shagnon's research. He's all about trying to show how Yanomamo that kill lots of people have greater reproductive success. Now, that's a fine question. Well, I mean, it's a fine thing to explore. Well, there are certain, I think, issues with some ideas in sociobiology. I teach it, but at the same time, I see its limits. I could give you a whole other video lecture on that, so I'm not going to go there right now. So back to Chagnon. He in addition to this whole fierceness idea, he attacks various non-governmental organizations in his research, and also a Yanomamo leader of a neighboring group. Now, there are also allegations that Chagnon intentionally or unintentionally skewed his data. This is an important thing to recognize. It also underscores, if you remember me saying, that all observation is positioned from somewhere. Well, in this case, Chagnon was doing the observing, and he saw things that he wanted to see to fit his model, to fit his theoretical perspective, his hypothesis in this case. So yeah, some issues with that. His fieldwork methods. Oof, this is probably what gets me the most. As somebody that works with various communities and in similar areas that Chagnon did, I work a lot with traditional hunters, people that would often be described as shamans or traditional practitioners in the West. I find this very problematic. I believe that when you do field work, you have to be really careful. And there's all sorts of issues that you can get yourself into. And in this case, I think Chagnon just might have got a little narrow-minded and lost track of his ethical responsibilities. From bribery to creating political favoritism with his gifts, pitting one group against others, and he incited conflict by doing so. He left an incredible mess. The repercussions of his work with the Yanomamo are still felt to this day. I'm sure that any researcher that goes down there is going to get an earful. I mean, it's all over the much broader anthropological community as a case study in ethics and professional responsibility. Now, on the con side, that Hagen says, nah, Terrence is really just got a bee in his bonnet about this. And they go through very in-depth, kind of a point by point, like, no, he didn't do that, no, he didn't do that, no, he didn't do that. Okay, I still don't think that fully explains it all, right? I don't know how you can explain away using your motorboat to transport a group of Yanomamo to conduct a raid on a neighboring group. No, not so much. Giving out of steel objects, machetes, axes, all sorts of things, frying pans, and these things become highly valued. Well, they already were highly valued, but by distributing them only to some and not across the board, or just distributing them at all, he created imbalances, and those had very specific consequences. Let's see here. Yeah, I don't think that you can really just explain those sorts of things away, and that speaks to the larger responsibility and ethical standards that anthropologists must adhere to when conducting anthropological fieldwork, whatever fieldwork, any research. Doesn't even have to be fieldwork. Let me I don't know, think back on my own career a little bit here. Um, where I work in West Africa, I work with the Malinke in particular, and they like to hunt. It's kind of one of the things they do. Um, Many people cite me as violating certain ethical standards or boundaries in the work that I do there, because I've I've lived with the Malinke and I've gone out with them hunting. Now, let me be clear, I'm not a hunter. I don't go out to hunt. I go out to observe them hunting and um, to understand the how and the why, if you would, and also the what. That matters a lot too. The who, what, where, when, and why. Yeah, it's but people, because there's harvesting of various animals involved in this research. I mean, that's what it's focused on. They view me as, somehow condoning or participating or just being in agreement with. And I guess that last one, it's their wildlife. It's not mine. Yeah, there are all sorts of statements about greater biodiversity and everything, but no, these are the folks that have been living in this place with these critters for a really long time. So yeah, I think it's pretty colonial to come in and judge that. Now, that isn't to say that I can't identify. Oh, there are certain pressures from globalization, if you would, globalizing factors that highly influence the rate of harvest, and that is not sustainable. But that's a different statement, if you see what I'm saying. And I actually address that in my research. But there are other things that I do that some people would say, now you're crossing a line. But for me, it's well, let me break it down. I was actually I'm trying to figure out where to start this story. Back in the Peace Corps, I met a fellow. He identified himself as a hunter at the time, and I didn't realize who he was, to put it mildly. Years later, I was back doing my master's research, and I came across the same guy, and I realized his status in the traditional medicine world of Mali, West Africa, and surrounding countries. He's kind of the man. His name's Kara. He is a recognized expert and practitioner. He's a man of many hats, from hunter to father to traditional practitioner. He used to do all sorts of things. He used to collect reptiles for Western scientific institutions, particularly snakes for venom, anti-venom. Anyway, Kara is quite the character. He's very unusual, if you would, and I developed a relationship with Kara through the years, and he's like, well, if you want to learn what this means to us, you got to do it like a Malian. And I'm like, so how's that? And he's like, well, you become an apprentice. And he went even further than that. And he's like, if you want to learn, you're going to be my apprentice. Some statements on his possessiveness of knowledge and insight there. Yeah. Anyway, for many years, Kara and I worked together, and through him, I got connected to a much larger community of all sorts of traditional hunters from all sorts of different ethnic groups. Bamana, Malinke, Fulani, Dogon, yeah, over a dozen. And yeah, I actually sold wildlife parts in one of the markets in the capital. I was an apprentice to a guy there, a vendor, and it was under the same, concept that if you want to learn, you have to learn as a local would learn. You can't dictate how you learn from an outside perspective, if you would. So I could, excuse me, I could have all the questions that I want. That doesn't mean people are going to answer them because they approach learning in a different way. And so it's my responsibility to bend to how you learn there. And that's what I did. I apprenticed for all sorts of people. Apprenticing is a tried and true and very ancient form of acquiring knowledge and insight. So I followed local rules, if you would. And I actually got in trouble with locals when I wouldn't go all the way, such as, oh, look, there's a snake. Go kill it. No, I'm not down. I'm not down with killing critters. I'm like, I had to be kind of sensitive. I'm like, I'm not here to hunt. I want to see you hunt. I want you to teach me. And that only works so long. Folks would get like, oh, no, you've seen me do this enough times now. I need to see you do it. And there I was like, I'm sorry, the rules say I can't. I literally say that. And they knew I was strange, that I was different, and it was just kind of understood. Like, okay, there's a boundary there. You can't cross that. And they would make fun of me, ridicule me. They would call me the hunter that doesn't hunt, or the hunter who can't kill. But all that makes for a great story and underscores that, I followed the standards, anthropological code of ethics. I maintained, the confidentiality of those that I worked with. Carr is an exception, and I actually name him by name because he specifically wants me to. He's like, yeah, no, you use my name. Anyway, where was I? Looking back at my notes. Sorry if I go all over the place. Yeah, back to kind of the standards of ethics. While to some folks I may have violated some, I would argue that I didn't. My master's and dissertation committees support that because I had to go through institutional review board. I went through my master's defense and my doctoral defense, my dissertation defense. And all along the way, I actually had special protocols for dealing with wildlife subjects, all right? Because that's a key thing to not just dealing with human subjects. I prefer to call them consultants. I don't believe they're my subjects. I'm learning from them. They're consultants. Yeah. So I hope that gives a little insight and helps pick apart, some of the ethical tripping stones that anthropologists can find them in. If you haven't, you should definitely check out those extra resources on the AAA's Code of Ethics. I got the PDF all there. You can look at some case studies. They're fun things to look at because you actually you kind of get the setup, and then you actually get you can kind of play out the scenario in your own head, how you would do it. And then you can see what actually happened, all right? So check them out. It'll help you kind of explore these ethical considerations. You should also check out all the extra resources that I'm putting in this module's announcement about the Yanomamo, Shagnon. Hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Our other big thing to talk about this week is applied anthropology. Oh, yes! Love this stuff. Applied anthropology is my bag. Anthropology is wonderful, but unless I find, this is kind of a personal, character, a principle, if you would, that I have. Knowledge is great, but being able to apply it is even better. So, as an undergrad, I loved everything that I learned in anthropology, and I actually ended up in the Peace Corps. And when I was in the Peace Corps, it really kind of pushed this button for me. I'm like, God, I can see all these various things around me, and I got a word here. And so I actually started, I used my anthropological training to help me adjust to life there. And then I also used it in my work that I did there. I think if you've read my discussion post, I talk about being on the management committee for the Boffin Faunal Reserve back in the day. And actually developed in anthropology, which is kind of what that would fall under. Is a key topic within applied anthropology. Development. we talk about the developing world, the underdeveloped, or the developing world, um, and it really creates these kind of dichotomies that you have those that have and those that have not, developed, developing, or underdeveloped. Now, we could debate that and its ramifications for forever. People still are. Um, but what I really want to highlight is it is a very productive area for anthropologists. It's a key area that we can contribute because we understand culture, we understand different concepts, ideas, values. From how people organize their family. And, here in the West, we might have our nuclear family, extended family, blended family. But other folks don't use those sort of distinctions. They view the world very differently than we do. And being able to, translate that so it can be used in a meaningful, productive way so it doesn't harm people, I think is one of the greatest things an anthropologist can do. It's kind of where I throw myself. Specifically environmental anthropology is probably right up there with medical anthropology in terms of the booming anthropology sectors in the world, in the job market, if you would. So, let's see here. We got CRM, Cultural Resource Management. I did this stuff for a long time. Back east we were based in Raleigh, but worked from upstate New York all the way down to the U.S. Virgin Islands, the entire eastern seaboard, and inland to Appalachia, Piedmonts. So it was awesome work. Any construction that involves a penny of federal money or state money has to have a cultural resource assessment. Most of the time we're subcontracted by environmental assessors, sometimes directly, and it's fun work. You kind of have let's just say running your own business has its own issues, but the work is awesome and fun. And, if you don't like sitting behind a desk or a computer, well, actually, I can't say that because you kind of have your field season during the warm part of the year. And the rest of the year, you're in the office. You're going over all the finds. You're doing all your inventories, assemblages, writing up all your reports. So part of the year out of the office, other part of the year just stuck behind a desk. But I give it 2 thumbs up. It was a lot of fun. Let's see here. Education in anthropology. Well, I think it's pretty clear that any school or institution, essentially, you can approach as a culture, right? Think of it just like, a group of people. I mean, that's what it is. And they have relationships with one another. And, they have, achieved and ascribed status within that framework. You have students that are at the bottom, right? And you have, the provost or, president or, headmaster that's at the top, right? Or, you can even go on a superstructure scale of like Minister of Education or something like that. So you can actually use anthropology to kind of explore education and the environment in which it happens from a very cultural perspective. English is now on the out as the primary language spoken in the United States. All right. You have your own personal feelings about that. That's nice. But what's important about this is that in the education system, what effect does that have? How do you address that? Our text talks about some of that a little bit. So, check it out. Here. What else? Business anthropology. I got a good friend that I actually did my master's work in applied anthropology. We were in the same cohort together at Oregon State. And he actually ended up specializing in business anthropology. He was contracted by various companies, some of them big companies. I can't say their names, confidentiality, and all that good stuff. But what he studied was how business deals are sealed in Russia, like kind of like the culture of business. And Russia had just opened up. There was all sorts of business going on. The West was trying to capitalize on this new opportunity. And yeah, that's where he threw himself. And he wrote his master's thesis pretty much on all the drinking games that go on in the Russian business environment. Because the deal isn't sealed in the boardroom, it's actually happening at the bar down the street. And it has a lot to do with these games, which you are kind of bending to local rules and yet negotiating a modern thing through these traditional practices, if you would. Fascinating stuff. Really, really cool. But it really comes down to a bunch of different drinking games that you have to know all the ins and outs of and the rules. And how to play it, right? How to, it's a game within a game. You could think of it that way. And he teaches these heavy hitter businessmen that go over to make big deals, right? He teaches them how to seal the deal, and he gets paid a nice sum for his contracted work as a consultant. So there's another avenue of anthropology that you can do a lot of work in. I kind of touched on it earlier, but I'll offer a little bit more. I mentioned medical anthro, but I didn't really go into it. This is really big stuff because all groups have their own unique healthcare systems. And this is something I've dabbled a little in. Most people and how I approach my work is really more about globalization, development, and natural resource management. But as you've learned from my tales, it has a lot to do with traditional beliefs. And traditional beliefs have a lot to do about maintaining well-being, which has everything to do with health, right? And for the groups that I work with, health isn't medical. Health extends, into your mental state, your economic state, your political state. Yeah, so it's fascinating. I'll use my own folks again, the Malinke. For them, they don't necessarily distinguish, oh yeah, you're just really stressed. No, they'll talk about like how they have problems in the family, problems about money. Your wife wants another baby, or you want another baby, and there's all sorts of internal conflict about that. It's fascinating, and what just absolutely blows my mind is within their worldview, they have attributes and wildlife and specific parts of wildlife that are used to address those issues. All right, and it's an incredibly diverse, extensive framework. It connects to divination. It connects to globalization because there's all sorts of outside pressures that are influencing changes. It's crazy cool stuff. Anyway, back to medical anthropology. I just explained how I have certain insights into a unique healthcare system. And that's one group in one country in Africa. The sky's the limit, folks. Like, it's all around you. I mean, in terms of medical anthropology, from the food you eat, right, to the things you do, and things you, I already said eat, consume. All those influence health. And then any group has their own kind of unique way that they deal with those things, and being able to understand that, translate it. Sometimes you might actually want to change things in it. Now that gets into some really gray area, and this actually applies for development anthropology as well, and environmental anthropology. This is another ethical consideration, though. So, what's it okay to change, right? Who gets to decide the change? Who assesses the change? And those are really, really important questions to ask. And unfortunately, they're often the questions that aren't asked, unless there's a good social scientist around. Now, let's see here. Let me give you a good example. Development anthropology example. So the town I lived in West Africa, a town called Manantali, used to be a village of a couple hundred people. And it got turned into a town of over 10,000 because they decided to build one of the largest dams in West Africa there. Huge dam. Multinational development project. USAID was involved. In fact, they were the folks that got to deal with relocating all the folks that were displaced when they started filling up the reservoir. All right, it was like over a dozen villages, actually quite a bit of people, over 10,000, I think. Anywho, this will make you laugh. USAID, they to compensate local communities for being displaced, they gave out money. Well, actually, you had a choice. You could have a new hut built, or be given the money for a new hut, a new house. Now, who do you think they talked to in order to assess that? Well, it was a very limited demographic of the local communities. It was the men. No women were present, from what I understand. I wasn't there then. I came along after. I gotta live in the fallout of all of this. So yeah, if there had been women there, women would have been like, oh yeah, we don't just want a new house, we need a new kitchen. A kitchen is essential to a house, right? It is one of the primary areas that women work in this region. So lack of representation there, and given that the whole project was spearheaded by a Westerner, it's not surprising that they didn't consider those things. Let's see here, what else? When folks were actually relocated, most of the men, a resounding percentage, opted to get the cash payout, right? Not an actual new structure to live in, but no, just give me the money. And do you think the women saw any of that money? Nope. I'm sure there was a few. But for the most part, no. In fact, they have a word to describe this behavior. It's called bouffing. And bouffing comes from the French to eat. It's en boussa. And yeah, the guys ate the money, if you would. They went and spent it on themselves. And the women didn't see anything of it. And as you can imagine, the women got pretty upset. So like those are some examples of issues that you would encounter in development anthropology, and they're serious things to consider. You really need to. One last thing I want to touch on, and that is you got a website to explore this week about the colonization of the Congo and contested representations of that. Now, I've pulled together some extra resources for you, also for applied anthro, so check those out, and the ones for colonization of the Congo Basin. Brace yourselves. There's some nasty stuff that went down, and so yeah, just a bit of a trigger warning, if you would. That's where I'm going to leave today, Module 2, and I hope you all have a great one. Bye.